I invited my parents and my family to Christmas dinner, but no one showed up. They abandoned me. And my name is Rosanna, and I am 34 years old. I have always been the one who tries to make family gatherings special, putting my heart into every detail. This year, I was so excited to host Christmas dinner in my new home. I spent weeks preparing everything perfect. Then came the moment no one showed up. My entire family had gone to my brother's house instead. Just as tears filled my eyes, the doorbell rang. It was Grandpa standing alone with a small box that would change everything I thought I knew about family. If you are watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you are from, and be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most. I grew up in a middle-class family in suburban Michigan, where life seemed normal on the surface, but never quite felt right beneath. As the middle child sandwiched between my older brother James and younger sister Tiffany, I occupied that classic overlooked position. James grew up to become a successful investment banker in Chicago, climbing the corporate ladder with our parents, cheering his every promotion. Tiffany, the baby of the family, could charm her way into getting whatever she wanted with a flutter of her eyelashes and a sweet smile. And then there was me, the reliable one, the steady one, the one whose achievements somehow always seemed less impressive. I became a school teacher, and while I love my job and find deep fulfillment in helping shape young minds, my career choice never earned the enthusiastic praise my parents lavished on James when he closed another big deal. When I would share stories about my students or a new teaching method I had developed, my mother would nod politely before quickly changing the subject to James's latest bonus or Tiffany's new boyfriend. There was only one person who truly saw me growing up, Grandpa Joseph. He was technically my paternal grandfather, but he felt more like my personal cheerleader. When I won the district spelling bee in 4th grade, my parents attended, but spent most of the time on their phones. Grandpa, however, sat in the front row beaming with pride and took me for ice cream afterward to celebrate. "You know why you are special, Rosanna?" he asked me that day over a hot fudge sundae. "Because you work hard for the things that matter." Those words became my mantra through years of trying to earn my parents' approval. I graduated with honors, earned my teaching credential, and secured a position at one of the most respected elementary schools in the district. Yet each accomplishment felt like throwing pebbles into a vast ocean of parental indifference. Family gatherings were exercises in invisibility. I would help prepare meals, set tables, and clean up afterward, all while watching my parents fawn over James's financial insights or Tiffany's social exploits. I remember one Thanksgiving when I had just been named Teacher of the Year for my district. I waited for the right moment to share my news, only to have it completely overshadowed by James, announcing he had purchased a luxury condo in downtown Chicago. "That is just wonderful, sweetheart," my mother gushed, completely forgetting I had been mid-sentence about my own achievement. That night, as I helped wash dishes while everyone else watched football in the living room, Grandpa Joseph joined me by the sink. "I heard about your award," he said quietly. "I am so proud of you." His recognition meant everything, but it could not fully heal the wound of parental indifference. The dynamics grew even more strained 3 years ago, when James married Eliza, the daughter of a banking executive, whose family had old money and extensive connections. Suddenly, family conversations revolved around their lavish lifestyle, the celebrity chef who catered their wedding and their honeymoon tour of exclusive European resorts. I tried not to be bitter. I really did. I focused on building my life, saving carefully from my teacher's salary clipping coupons and putting aside a little each month toward my dream of homeownership. When I finally had enough for a down payment on a modest but charming 3-bedroom house with a backyard perfect for summer barbecues, I was ecstatic. The house needed work, certainly. The kitchen had laminate countertops instead of the marble in James's mansion. The floors were hardwood but needed refinishing. The backyard was overgrown, but it was mine, and I poured myself into making it beautiful. Learning to tile and paint from YouTube videos, planting a garden and hunting for bargains at estate sales to furnish it with character. Through it all, Grandpa Joseph would visit regularly, bringing coffee and donuts on Saturday mornings when I was covered in paint or dirt. "This place has soul," he declared. the first time he visited, not like those sterile showrooms some people live in. I knew he was referring to James's immaculate designer home, and I appreciated the validation. When autumn arrived this year, I decided that owning my home meant it was finally time to take the initiative. I would host Christmas dinner for the entire family. Perhaps this would be my moment to finally be seen to have my parents and siblings appreciate what I had built for myself, despite the lack of family financial support that both James and Tiffany had received over the years. I called my mother in October to extend the invitation. "Christmas at your place." She sounded surprised, as though the concept of me hosting had never occurred to her. "Well, I suppose that could work. Your father and I do not have other plans yet. Let me check with James and Tiffany and get back to you." A week later, she confirmed that everyone would come. James and Eliza, your father and me, Tiffany and her new boyfriend Daniel, and of course Grandpa Joseph. That makes 8, including you. I was overjoyed and immediately began planning the perfect Christmas dinner. From the moment my family confirmed they would come, I threw myself into creating the perfect Christmas experience. This was not just about a meal. This was my opportunity to show my family who I really was, to make them see me in a way they never had before. I started with the decorations, knowing I could not compete with the professional decorator James hired each year. Instead, I went for warmth and personal touches. I spent weekends crafting handmade ornaments for my tree, each one with special significance. I created a photo ornament for each family member, featuring happy moments from our past. For James, a picture of him hitting his first home run in Little League. For Tiffany, her high school graduation. For my parents, their 30th anniversary celebration. I strung white lights along my front porch and around my windows, creating a warm, welcoming glow. I placed candles in every room selected for their seasonal scents, cinnamon and pine and cranberry. I adorned the fireplace mantel with garland and family photos spanning decades, including some beautiful old ones of Grandpa Joseph when he was young. The dining room became my canvas. I purchased a new tablecloth in deep crimson cloth napkins, in complementary forest green, and started polishing the silver flatware I had inherited from my maternal grandmother. I found beautiful vintage plates at a thrift store, each one slightly different, but harmonizing in shades of cream and gold. For centerpieces, I created arrangements of pine branches, holly berries, and white candles in crystal holders found at an estate sale. The menu required careful consideration. My mother always prepared the same traditional dinner, and I wanted to honor those traditions while adding my own touches. I knew James preferred dark meat turkey, while Tiffany only ate white meat. My father loved stuffing with sausage, while my mother preferred hers with chestnuts. Eliza was particular about organic, locally sourced ingredients, and Tiffany's new boyfriend Daniel was a pescatarian. I created spreadsheets to track every detail and started testing recipes in November. I practiced making my mother's traditional cranberry orange relish, but added a hint of ginger to brighten the flavor. I perfected my grandmother's dinner rolls, but brushed them with rosemary butter. I experimented with 3 different pumpkin pie recipes before finding the perfect balance of spices. The gifts required equal attention. I could not afford the expensive presents James would undoubtedly shower on everyone, but I could make each gift thoughtful and personal. For my father, I found a first edition of his favorite mystery author at a used bookstore. For my mother, I commissioned a local artist to create a watercolor of her childhood home from an old photograph. For James, I tracked down a vintage program from the first Cubs game our grandfather took him to. For Eliza, I found a beautiful handcrafted ceramic serving bowl from a local potter. For Tiffany, I spent weeks knitting a luxurious infinity scarf in her favorite color. For Daniel, whom I had never met, I selected a collection of specialty teas from around the world, since Tiffany mentioned he was a tea enthusiast. For Grandpa Joseph, I created a memory book collecting photos and stories from his life, interviewing distant relatives by phone to gather anecdotes and transcribing some of his favorite tales that he had told me over the years. The financial strain was significant. My teacher's salary did not leave much room for extravagance, especially after the recent house purchase. I picked up extra tutoring jobs on weekends and sold some of my watercolor paintings at a local craft fair to afford everything. I skipped lunch at work, bringing apples from my backyard tree instead of buying food. I turned the thermostat down to 60 degrees, wearing sweaters indoors to save on heating costs. Every sacrifice felt worthwhile. This dinner would be the turning point in my family relationships. They would walk into my home and finally see me not as the invisible middle child, but as a capable creative adult who had built something beautiful. 2 weeks before Christmas, I called everyone to confirm. "We would not miss it for the world, honey," my mother assured me. "Your father is looking forward to seeing your new place." James sounded distracted but confirmed. Sure, we will be there. Eliza wants to know if you need her to bring anything." "Just yourselves," I answered, touched by the offer. Tiffany was her usual bubbly self. "Cannot wait to introduce you to Daniel. He is absolutely perfect, Rosie. You are going to love him." Grandpa Joseph did not need to be called. He showed up at my door with a box of Christmas lights for my tree. "Just wanted to make sure my girl has everything she needs for her big day," he said, hugging me tightly. The night before Christmas, I stayed up until 2 in the morning, wrapping the last presents with care, each one with handmade tags and ribbons curled just so. I prepared whatever dishes could be made ahead, brining the turkey, chopping vegetables, and setting the table to perfection. As I placed the last fork in position, I stood back and imagined my family gathered around this table, their faces lit by candlelight, finally seeing the home and the life I had created. Everything was perfect. The stage was set. Tomorrow would be the Christmas I had always dreamed of. I woke up at 5:30 on Christmas morning, too excited to sleep any longer. Outside my window, fresh snow had fallen overnight, dusting my yard with white powder that sparkled in the early morning light. It could not have been more perfect if I had special ordered the weather. The turkey needed to go in by 8 if we were going to eat it too. So I padded downstairs in my robe and slippers, turning on the Christmas tree lights and the coffee maker simultaneously. The house looked magical in the soft glow, every surface polished and perfect. I took a moment just to breathe it in, this haven I had created before getting to work. I moved with practiced efficiency, transferring the turkey from the refrigerator to the roasting pan, stuffing the cavity with aromatics and massaging herb butter under the skin, just as I had learned from countless cooking shows. Once the bird was in the oven, I turned my attention to the sides that needed fresh preparation. I diced onions and celery for the 2 different stuffings, one with sausage for my father, and one with chestnuts for my mother. I peeled 5 pounds of potatoes for mashing, prepared Brussels sprouts with bacon for roasting, and assembled a green bean casserole with homemade mushroom sauce instead of canned soup. For Daniel, I prepared a special roasted salmon with dill and lemon, making sure it would not touch any meat products during cooking. By 11, the house was filled with the most amazing aromas. I took a quick break to shower and dress, selecting a festive red sweater and dark jeans, casual but put together. I applied light makeup and styled my hair, wanting to look my best, without seeming like I was trying too hard. Back in the kitchen, I continued preparing, whipping the potatoes with warm cream and butter, until they were fluffy clouds in the serving bowl, deglazing the turkey drippings for gravy, and arranging a cheese board with local selections and homemade cranberry conserve. At 12:30, I opened the bottle of wine I had splurged on, allowing it to breathe. I checked my phone for messages, slightly concerned that I had not heard from anyone about their arrival time. No texts or calls had come through. I sent a quick group message. "Everything's almost ready. Can't wait to see you all. Let me know if you're running late." 1 o'clock came and went with no response. I tried not to worry, telling myself they were probably driving and could not text. I lit the candles on the table and, in the living room, turned on the playlist of classic Christmas music. I had curated and made final adjustments to place settings and serving dishes. By 1:30, anxiety began to creep in. Dinner was scheduled for 2, and no one had arrived or even called. I tried calling my mother, but it went straight to voicemail. Same with my father and Tiffany. James's phone rang, but no one answered. "They are probably just running late," I told myself, peeking through the front curtains at my empty, snow-covered driveway. Traffic might be bad with the snow. I adjusted the oven temperature to keep everything warm without drying out. I rearranged the appetizers on the coffee table for the 3rd time. I straightened cushions that were already perfectly aligned. At 2:15, with still no word from anyone, I felt the first flutter of real panic. Had there been an accident? Should I be worried about their safety? I tried calling everyone again, with the same results. Voicemail, unanswered, ring. At 2:30, I turned the oven down to its lowest setting and sat at my meticulously set table alone, fighting back tears. The candles had burned down an inch, wax dripping onto my perfect centerpiece. The ice in the water glasses had long since melted. The perfect scene I had imagined was dissolving before my eyes, and I had no idea why. I checked social media, something I rarely did, wondering if there might be some clue there. And that is when I saw it. A photo posted just 30 minutes ago on my sister's Instagram. The caption read, "Perfect Christmas with the fam at James and Eliza's heart blessed our family time." The photo showed my entire family gathered around James's massive dining table in his suburban mansion. My mother and father beaming, Tiffany snuggled against a handsome man who must be Daniel, James and Eliza playing host. Even Grandpa Joseph was in the background of the shot, though he did not look nearly as happy as the others. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone. This could not be happening. There must be some mistake. Perhaps the photo was from last year or some other gathering. But the date stamp did not lie. Posted December 25th, 2:27 p.m. Today, right now, while I sat alone at my empty table. I called my mother again, and miraculously she picked up this time. "Mom," my voice trembled. "Where is everyone? We were supposed to have Christmas dinner at my house today." A pause. Then, "Oh, Rosanna, did not James call you? We decided it would be easier to have dinner at his house since it is more centrally located for everyone. I thought he was going to let you know." The casual way she said it, as if a minor miscommunication had occurred rather than a complete betrayal, made my stomach turn. "No one told me anything," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "I have been cooking for days. I have presents for everyone. The table is set. The food is ready." "Oh dear," she sighed, sounding more inconvenienced than concerned. "Well, you should have checked in sooner. We have already eaten. James prepared the most amazing prime rib you have ever tasted, and Eliza hired a pianist to play carols. It has been just lovely." In the background, I could hear laughter and music, the sounds of the perfect family Christmas I had tried to create. "Can you put Grandpa Joseph on the phone?" I asked, desperate to speak to the one person who might actually care. "He stepped out a while ago, said he needed some air. You know how he gets overwhelmed with too many people." She lowered her voice. "Between us, I think he is having one of his moments. He seemed quite upset about something." Before I could respond, I heard my brother's voice in the background asking who she was talking to. "It is your sister," my mother replied, not bothering to cover the receiver. "Tell her I will save her a plate," James called out, followed by laughter from several people. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of what they had done. Just the offhand offer of leftovers like I was some charity case, rather than a family member who had been deliberately excluded and forgotten. My mother came back on the line. "James says he will save you some food if you want to come over later." "No, thank you," I managed to say before hanging up. I sat in stunned silence at my beautiful empty table. The turkey would be dry by now, the potatoes would have formed a skin, the gravy would have thickened too much. Hours and days of work, hundreds of dollars I could not really afford, all wasted. But the waste of food and money was nothing compared to the waste of hope. I had genuinely believed this dinner would change things, that my family would finally see me. Instead, they had made it clearer than ever that I did not matter. I stood up suddenly, overwhelmed by an urge to destroy everything. I wanted to flip the table, smash the plates, throw the food against the wall. I wanted to create outside the physical destruction that matched the emotional devastation within me. I picked up a dinner plate, fingers gripping the edge so tightly my knuckles turned white. One throw. That is all it would take to start a cascade of destruction that might release some of this pain. But just as I raised my arm, the doorbell rang. The doorbell's chime cut through my fog of anger and pain, startling me so badly I nearly dropped the plate I had been prepared to hurl against the wall. For a wild moment, I thought perhaps it was my family having come to their senses and arrived en masse to apologize. I set the plate down with trembling hands and moved to the door, wiping tears from my cheeks and trying to compose myself. Whoever was there, I did not want them to see me in such a state of distress. When I opened the door, I found Grandpa Joseph standing on my snow-dusted porch. His 82-year-old frame seemed smaller somehow, bundled in his worn wool coat, a knitted scarf wrapped around his neck. In one hand, he clutched a small wooden box, and in the other, a bottle of wine. Snowflakes clung to his silver hair, and eyebrows indicating he had been out in the weather for some time. "Grandpa," I said, shock rendering me nearly speechless. "I thought you were at James's." His kind eyes, crinkled at the corners from decades of smiles, now reflected a profound sadness and something else, something that looked like determination. "I was," he replied, his voice gruff with emotion. "But I could not stay there knowing what they had done to you. May I come in?" I stepped aside, allowing him to enter the warmth of my home. The contrast between his genuine concern and my family's callous dismissal brought fresh tears to my eyes. "You knew about the change of plans?" I asked as I helped him out of his coat. "Not until I arrived at James's place," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They told me there had been a slight change and that everyone had agreed it made more sense to gather at the bigger house. When I asked about you, James said you had been informed and chose not to come." He shook his head, disgust evident on his face. "I knew immediately it was a lie. I saw your face when you invited us all for Christmas. You would never simply choose not to come, especially without telling me." He looked around my living room, taking in the carefully decorated tree, the candles, the perfectly arranged cushions and throws. "I confronted them," he continued, "told them I knew they had deliberately excluded you. Your mother tried to brush it off as a miscommunication. Your father stared at his shoes. James had the audacity to look annoyed that I was making, as he put it, a scene over nothing." He placed the wine bottle on a side table and held the wooden box tighter. "I told them I would not stay where you were not welcome. Eliza tried to convince me to stay, saying I was being dramatic. Your sister just looked uncomfortable. Not one of them offered to call you or to go fetch you." His voice broke slightly. "Not one Rosanna." I led him to the dining room where the evidence of my efforts lay in silent accusation. The perfect table setting for 8, the now unlit candles, the cooling food. "Oh, my dear girl," Grandpa whispered, taking in the scene. "You did all this?" It was not a question, but an acknowledgement of the love and care that had gone into every detail. "I worked so hard," I admitted, tears flowing freely now. "I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted them to see me, to be proud of what I have accomplished." Grandpa placed the wooden box carefully on a side table and took my hands in his. "I am proud of you," he said firmly. "I have always been proud of you. And I am so sorry they could not see what has always been clear to me, that you are the most genuine, loving member of this family." He looked at the abandoned feast and nodded decisively. "Now I believe you promised me Christmas dinner, and I see a magnificent meal before us. Let us not let your efforts go to waste." In that moment, his simple acceptance and appreciation meant more than any reaction I could have received from the rest of my family. I felt something inside me begin to heal just a tiny bit. I relit the candles while Grandpa opened the wine he had brought. We filled 2 plates with turkey stuffing potatoes and all the sides. It felt strange and sad to see just 2 place settings at the enormous table, but there was also something intimate and real about it that the larger gathering might have lacked. As we ate, Grandpa complimented each dish, sincerely asking about ingredients and techniques. He told me stories of Christmases from his youth, some I had heard before, and some that were new to me. We laughed together over his tale of burning the turkey the first year he was married to my grandmother, and how they ended up eating peanut butter sandwiches for Christmas dinner. "Best meal I ever had," he said with a wink, because it was just the 2 of us starting our own traditions. After we had eaten our fill and moved to the apple pie and coffee stage, Grandpa grew more serious. "Rosanna," he said, his tone making me look up from my dessert, "I have been waiting for the right moment to share something with you. I think that moment is now." He reached for the wooden box he had brought, placing it gently on the table between us. "What is this?" I asked, curious, despite my emotional exhaustion. "This," he said, resting his weathered hand on the lid, "is the truth about our family, and perhaps the reason I have always felt a special connection to you above the others." The wooden box sat between us, its surface burnished with age and care. It was not ornate or flashy, just a simple handcrafted container with a small brass clasp securing the lid. Yet the way Grandpa Joseph's hand rested upon it communicated its immense significance. "What do you mean, the truth about our family?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandpa took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for what he was about to share. "Rosanna, has it ever struck you as odd that I seem to understand what it feels like to be an outsider in this family better than anyone else?" I nodded slowly. It was true. Grandpa had always been my ally, the one person who saw me when everyone else looked past. "There is a reason for that," he continued. "I want you to open this box. What is inside might be surprising, but I believe you of all people will understand its meaning." With trembling fingers, I released the small brass clasp and lifted the lid. Inside were several yellowed envelopes tied with faded ribbon, a collection of black and white photographs, and nestled in the center, a silver locket on a delicate chain. "These are letters between your grandmother, Margaret, and me," Grandpa explained, indicating the envelopes, "from before and after we were married. The photographs tell a story that has been kept quiet in our family for decades, and the locket, well, that has been passed down through 4 generations of what I think of as my true family." I carefully lifted out the top photograph. It showed a much younger Grandpa Joseph, in an army uniform, standing beside a beautiful woman I recognized as my grandmother. They looked happy, their smiles genuine, despite the formal pose of the era. But something about the date stamped on the corner caught my attention. "This was taken in 1958, I said, confused. "But Dad was born in 1956. Grandpa nodded, his eyes holding mine steadily. "Yes, 2 years before I met your grandmother." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You are not Dad's biological father." "No," Grandpa confirmed gently. "Your grandmother Margaret was a young widow when I met her. Your father was 2 years old. His biological father, a man named Richard Wells, died in a factory accident when Margaret was 7 months pregnant." I stared at him, struggling to process this revelation. "Does Dad know?" "Yes, though we did not tell him until he was 18. By then I had been his father in every way that mattered for 16 years. He took the news well, better than I had feared. He said he had no memories of anyone but me as his father, and that was what counted." Grandpa gestured to the letters. "Read the top one if you would." I carefully untied the ribbon and opened the first envelope, unfolding a letter written in elegant flowing script. "My dearest Joseph," I read aloud. "Today, Tommy asked why his last name is different from mine. He is too young to understand the concept of marriage and taking a husband's name, let alone the complications of loss and single motherhood. I told him simply that he carries his father's name as a special honor. Someday I will need to tell him more, but for now this satisfies him. I find myself wondering if he will ever know a father's love, the kind I see in your eyes when you speak of your nieces and nephews. Would that all children could be looked upon with such genuine affection. With all my heart, Margaret." I looked up from the letter, deeply moved by my grandmother's words and the obvious love between them. "There are dozens more," Grandpa said. "Our courtship was primarily through these letters while I was stationed overseas. By the time I returned, I knew I wanted to marry Margaret and raise Tommy as my own son." He gestured to another photograph, this one showing a young boy of about 3 seated on Grandpa Joseph's lap, both of them laughing. "That was taken the weekend after our wedding. Tommy, your father, accepted me immediately. Children have an instinct for who truly cares for them." His eyes grew distant with memory. "I legally adopted him when he was 5, giving him my last name, but he already considered me his father long before that." I sifted through more photographs, seeing the family grow with the additions of aunts and uncles I knew. Then I found one that made me pause. It showed my father as a teenager, his expression stormy, standing apart from the rest of the family at what appeared to be a summer picnic. Grandpa noticed which photo had caught my attention. "Ah, yes, the difficult years. Every child goes through them, but Tommy's were particularly challenging. When he was 16, he went through a phase of rebellion. He fell in with a group of boys who were not the best influence. There was an incident involving shoplifting." Grandpa's voice grew heavier. "The other boys came from influential families in our community. Their parents made arrangements for the charges to be dropped with minimal consequences. But Tommy, as my adopted son, rather than from one of the old families, was treated differently. The store owner wanted to press charges against him specifically. He shook his head at the memory. I went to that man myself. I told him that if he wanted to punish one boy, he needed to punish them all equally or none at all. I reminded him that his own son had been caught joyriding the previous year with no consequences. It was not a proud moment using such tactics, but I would not allow Tommy to be treated as less worthy of protection simply because he was not my biological son. I was stunned. I had never heard this story about my father. What happened? The man dropped the charges against Tommy too, but there were whispers in town afterward, people suggesting that Tommy was not really a griffin, that he did not belong. It affected him deeply. He became determined to prove himself, to show everyone he belonged in our family and in that community. Grandpa's expression turned sad. I fear that determination warped into something unhealthy over time. A need to achieve status, to be associated with the right people, to never again feel like an outsider. The parallel to my own feelings of exclusion was striking. Is that why Dad always favored James and Tiffany over me? Because they somehow fit his image of the perfect family better? Grandpa sighed heavily. I believe your father sees in James everything he aspired to be: successful and respected by the community. And Tiffany, as the youngest, represents the secure family position he felt he lacked as a child. But you, Rosanna. His eyes softened as they met mine. You remind him too much of himself as he truly was before he built all those walls. Authentic, caring more about people than position. He reached for the silver locket and held it up the metal, catching the candlelight. This locket belonged to my mother. Inside were pictures of her parents. When I married your grandmother, she placed a tiny photo of herself and Tommy inside, replacing one of the original photos. When your father married your mother, I gave it to them, and Margaret added their wedding portrait to join the family lineage. He opened the locket to show me the tiny, perfectly preserved photographs inside 4 generations of family history captured in miniature. I asked for it back last year, Grandpa continued. I told your parents I wanted to have it cleaned and the chain repaired. That was true, but not the whole truth. He closed the locket and placed it in my palm, curling my fingers around it. I wanted to give it to you. Me, I whispered, overwhelmed by the gesture. But why not James or Tiffany? Because you understand what truly makes a family, he said simply. Not blood, not status, not obligation, but love and choice. Every day we choose who we consider family, who we protect, who we prioritize. I chose your grandmother and your father. And I choose you, Rosanna. Tears spilled down my cheeks, but they were different from the tears of earlier cleansing, rather than corrosive. There is more, Grandpa said, reaching deeper into the box and withdrawing a legal document. I have made certain financial arrangements. James and Tiffany have always had advantages you were denied. Your parents helped James with the down payment on his first condo. They paid for Tiffany's entire college education. You worked and took out loans. He unfolded the document, revealing what appeared to be trust fund paperwork. I have established a trust fund for you, Rosanna. It is substantial. I sold some property last year that had been in the family for generations, and I want you to have the proceeds. I gasped, unable to comprehend what he was telling me. Grandpa, no. I cannot accept that. What about James and Tiffany? They will receive their share of my estate eventually, but this is separate. This is to balance the scales that should never have been uneven. This is my choice. His tone made it clear the matter was not open for discussion. Then he withdrew one final item from the box, a deed. This is for my lake house, the cabin where we spent those summers fishing when you were young. I am giving it to you now, not after I am gone. The lake house was my favorite place in the world, a rustic cabin on 20 acres of wooded shoreline where I had spent the happiest days of my childhood. James had always complained about the mosquitoes there, and Tiffany found it boring without shopping nearby. But I had loved the peacefulness, the simplicity. Grandpa, this is too much, I protested weakly. He took my hands firmly. No, it is exactly right. The lake house should go to the person who loves it most, who will care for it and respect its history. Just as a family should cherish the member who holds its true heart, even when they fail to do so. He pressed the deed into my hands alongside the trust paperwork and the locket. We cannot choose the family we are born into, Rosanna, but we can choose the family we build. I want to help you build yours filled with people who see you clearly and value you truly. As I held these tangible symbols of Grandpa's love and faith in me, I felt something shift inside. The pain of my family's betrayal was still there, but alongside it now was a new understanding, a new possibility. Perhaps what I had been seeking from the wrong people could be found elsewhere with those who chose to love me as I was. Thank you, I whispered, knowing the words were inadequate for what he had given me not just today, but throughout my life. For everything. He smiled, his eyes bright with unshed tears. No, my dear girl. Thank you for reminding an old man what family truly means. The days after Christmas unfolded in ways I never could have anticipated. While most people were recovering from holiday excesses or exchanging unwanted gifts, I was rebuilding my understanding of family from the ground up. Grandpa Joseph stayed with me for 3 days, sleeping in my guest room and helping me process both the emotional aftermath of my family's rejection and the practical implications of his gifts. We visited the lake house together, the property now legally mine, and walked the snowy shoreline discussing possibilities. You could live here full time, he suggested, as we stood on the dock watching ice formations along the water's edge. It is only 40 minutes from your school. I considered it imagining waking up to this view every day, the peace and privacy of having nature as my closest neighbor. I might, I replied, but I also like having a foot in both worlds. The lake for weekends and summers, the city home for convenience during the school year. You can do both, he assured me. The trust fund gives you options your teacher's salary alone never could. The trust fund. Even after reviewing the paperwork with the family attorney who Grandpa had arranged for me to meet, I could barely comprehend its magnitude. Grandpa had sold a large parcel of undeveloped land that had been in the family for generations, land that developers had coveted for years. The proceeds invested wisely would generate enough income to substantially supplement my teaching salary for the rest of my life. I never wanted you to worry about money the way your grandmother and I did when we were starting out, Grandpa explained. But I did not want to rob you of the satisfaction of building your own life either. Now you have proven your strength and capability. The money will enhance your life, not define it. On the 4th day after Christmas, my mother finally called. I let it go to voicemail the first time, not ready to hear whatever excuse or justification she might offer. When she called again immediately, I reluctantly answered. Rosanna. She began, her voice carrying that particular tone of forced cheerfulness she used when uncomfortable. I hope you had a nice Christmas despite the mix-up. Mix-up. As if what had happened were an innocent scheduling error rather than a deliberate exclusion. It was not a mix-up, Mom, I said quietly but firmly. Everyone knew where Christmas dinner was supposed to be. No one bothered to tell me plans had changed. Well, she faltered slightly. These things happen in families. No need to make it into a big production. Your father and I thought perhaps we could stop by this afternoon to exchange gifts. The casual way she tried to paper over their behavior stoked a slow, burning anger in me. No, I said simply. I am not available. A startled pause. Excuse me. I said no. I am not available to pretend everything is fine when it is not. I spent weeks preparing to host Christmas. I spent money I could barely afford on food and gifts. Not one of you had the basic courtesy to tell me you had decided to go to James's instead. Rosanna, you are being dramatic. It was just a dinner. It was never just a dinner, Mom. It was a statement about who matters in this family and who does not. I have spent my entire life trying to matter to you and Dad as much as James and Tiffany do. Christmas just made it clear that I never will. That is ridiculous, she protested. We love all our children equally. No, you don't, and that is your right. Parents aren't required to love their children equally, but I am not required to pretend I don't notice the difference. I could almost see her flinch through the phone. My mother hated confrontation, hated anything that disturbed her carefully maintained image of our perfect family. "What exactly do you want, Rosanna?" she asked, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "I want you to acknowledge what you did. I want you to understand how hurtful it was. And I want you to respect that I need space from this family dynamic right now." "Space?" She sounded genuinely alarmed. "What does that mean?" "It means I won't be attending Sunday dinners for a while. It means I'm not going to keep trying so hard to be included where I'm clearly not wanted. It means I'm going to invest my emotional energy in people who actually see me." "This is about your grandfather, isn't it? He has been filling your head with nonsense. He was very rude at James's house, storming out the way he did." The attempt to shift blame and rewrite the narrative was so predictable it almost made me laugh. "This is about 34 years of being the afterthought in this family," I corrected her. "Grandpa is the only one who ever made me feel like I mattered just as I am." "Well," my mother sniffed, "when you are done with this little tantrum, your father and I will be here. Family is family after all." "Yes," I agreed. "Family is family, but we might have very different definitions of what that means." I ended the call feeling both drained and strangely liberated. For the first time, I had spoken my truth without cushioning it to protect my parents' feelings. The world had not ended. I had not crumbled into dust. I had simply stated my reality and set a boundary. Similar conversations followed with James and Tiffany. James was dismissive, suggesting I was overreacting to a simple change of venue. Tiffany was more apologetic, but still seemed not to fully grasp the deeper issue. Neither conversation yielded the acknowledgement or understanding I had hoped for, but I no longer felt defined by their perceptions of me. My father never called at all. In January, I took a personal day from school and drove to the lake house with a carload of supplies. The cabin needed a thorough cleaning after sitting vacant through the fall, and I wanted to begin making it truly mine. As I swept floors and washed windows, I found myself thinking about the family history Grandpa had shared with me, about chosen family versus blood relations. By February, with Grandpa's blessing and practical advice, I had made the decision to use part of the trust fund to establish a community center for disadvantaged children in the neighborhood where I taught. Many of my students came from challenging home situations, with parents working multiple jobs and limited safe spaces for after-school activities. I purchased a vacant building just 3 blocks from the school, a former community center that had closed due to lack of funding 5 years earlier. Architects were hired, permits secured, and renovation began. The Lakeside Learning Center would offer tutoring, arts programs, sports, and most importantly, a sense of belonging to children who, like me, often felt overlooked and unseen. Spring brought new beginnings in more ways than one. The lake house renovations were completed, updating the plumbing and electrical systems, while maintaining the rustic charm I loved. The community center was on track for a summer opening, and I began hosting regular gatherings for what I had come to think of as my chosen family. There was Maria, a fellow teacher whose husband had left her with 2 young children and a mountain of debt. There was Khalil, the elderly widower next door, who taught me to garden and joined me for coffee every Sunday morning. There was Drew, the contractor working on the community center, who became a friend, bringing his guitar to evening gatherings and teaching us all obscure folk songs. There was Lena, a former student of mine now in college, who needed a safe place to stay during breaks when the dorms closed. We celebrated birthdays and achievements together. We showed up for each other during difficulties. We created new traditions that honored each person's uniqueness rather than demanding conformity. It was messy and imperfect and more authentic than any family gathering I had ever experienced growing up. In early June, I received an unexpected visitor. My sister Tiffany showed up at my door on a Wednesday evening, looking uncharacteristically subdued. "Can we talk?" she asked, her usual bubbly confidence nowhere in evidence. I invited her in, curious about what had prompted this solo visit. We sat on my back porch watching fireflies begin to emerge in the summer twilight. "Daniel and I broke up," she said after a long silence. "I am sorry to hear that," I replied, genuinely meaning it. She shrugged. "Do not be. He was not right for me. I just liked how much Mom and Dad approved of him. Ivy League education, good family, proper pedigree." She made air quotes around the last words, a bitterness in her tone I had never heard before. What happened? I asked. I realized I was dating him for all the wrong reasons, just like I do everything else to please Mom and Dad. She looked at me directly. You were the smart one, Rosie. You figured it out sooner than I did. Figured what out? That their approval is a moving target, that no matter what we achieve, it is never quite enough. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger, a nervous habit from childhood. James is figuring it out too, though he would never admit it. This surprised me. James, what do you mean? His firm is downsizing. He might lose his job. Suddenly, Mom and Dad are treating him differently, like his value to them is tied to his success. She gave a small, sad laugh. Welcome to my world, big brother. I absorbed this information, trying not to feel a vindictive satisfaction at James's reversal of fortune. Anyway, Tiffany continued, I have been doing a lot of thinking since Christmas about how we treated you, about how I have been complicit in this family dynamic for years. She met my eyes directly. I am sorry, Rosanna, truly sorry. What we did was cruel and thoughtless. Her apology, the first genuine one I had received from any family member, touched me deeply. Thank you for saying that, I said softly. It means a lot. I miss you, she admitted. I miss my big sister, who always let me raid her closet and helped me with my math homework and never told Mom when I snuck out to meet Jason Parker in 11th grade. I smiled at the memory. You were totally obvious about it. Mom knew. What? Tiffany's eyes widened. She never said anything Of course not. That would have meant acknowledging her perfect baby girl was human. We both laughed, a moment of genuine connection breaking through years of family programming. Can we start over? Tiffany asked hesitantly. Not pretending the past did not happen, but maybe building something new. I want to know the real you. Not the version of you I was taught to see. Her vulnerability and sincerity moved me. I would like that very much. That conversation marked the beginning of a genuine relationship with my sister, one based on mutual respect rather than prescribed family roles. We began meeting regularly for coffee, sometimes joined by Grandpa Joseph, whose joy at seeing us connect as adults was palpable. My parents remained more resistant to change. After several stilted attempts at reconciliation without acknowledgement, I maintained firm boundaries. I would engage with them on my terms, not allowing myself to be drawn back into old patterns of seeking approval and accepting scraps of attention. James was the most challenging. When his expected layoff materialized in August, his carefully constructed image of success began to crumble. His wife Eliza, who had married the successful investment banker with the perfect pedigree, seemed increasingly distant as their financial situation grew precarious. The mansion had to be sold, replaced by a still lovely but significantly less impressive home. At Grandpa's gentle urging, I reached out to James during this difficult transition. His initial response was prideful rejection, unable to accept support from the sister he had long dismissed. But as his circumstances continued to deteriorate with Eliza, ultimately filing for divorce when the lifestyle she had married into disappeared, James gradually began to see me differently. By the time December rolled around again, bringing with it the anniversary of last year's painful Christmas, much had changed. My community center was thriving, offering a safe haven to dozens of children daily. The lake house had become my weekend sanctuary, a place of peace and reflection. My chosen family had expanded to include neighbors, colleagues, and friends, bound by genuine affection rather than obligation. And I had made a decision about the approaching holiday. I would host Christmas dinner again, but with very different expectations and a completely different guest list. Are you sure about this? Grandpa Joseph asked when I shared my plans with him. After last year, no one would blame you for skipping the holiday entirely. I am sure, I told him. But this year, I am inviting people who actually want to be here. My family of choice, not just blood. The invitation list included Maria and her children, Khalil, Drew, Lena, and several colleagues who had nowhere else to go for the holiday. I also invited Tiffany, who had been making genuine efforts to build a healthier relationship with me. And after much consideration, I extended an invitation to my parents and James, with the clear understanding that this was an opportunity for a new beginning, not a return to old patterns. "And you, of course," I told Grandpa. "Guest of honor." He smiled, eyes twinkling. "I would not miss it for the world." On Christmas Eve, I sat on the porch of the lake house, now festively decorated with simple white lights and natural greenery. The frozen lake stretched before me, reflecting the moon and stars. The wooden box Grandpa had given me last year sat on my lap, the silver locket, now containing 2 new photographs alongside the historical ones, snapshots of my chosen family at our Thanksgiving gathering. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. Some invitations had been accepted, others declined. My parents had responded with tentative acceptance, clearly unsure how to navigate this new dynamic. James had declined, still too proud to accept the changed circumstances. Tiffany had enthusiastically accepted, asking what she could bring. But regardless of who walked through my door tomorrow, I now understood what Grandpa had tried to teach me last Christmas. Family was not defined by blood or obligation. It was created through choice, nurtured through authentic connection, and sustained by mutual respect and love. The girl who had once desperately sought validation from those who could not or would not provide it had transformed into a woman who knew her own worth. The empty table of last Christmas would tomorrow be filled with people who chose to be present, who saw me clearly and valued me truly. I fastened the locket around my neck, a tangible reminder of this journey, and whispered a thank you to the stars for the painful gift of last Christmas. Without that profound disappointment, I might never have discovered the joy of building a family on my own terms. As I prepare to welcome my guests tomorrow, I wonder about your own experiences with family chosen, or otherwise. Have you ever had to rebuild your understanding of what family means? Have you found your people the ones who see and celebrate the real you? Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that family is something we create, not just something we are born into. Thank you for being part of my journey, and I wish you a holiday season filled with authentic connections and true belonging.